Rackspace and Cloud Talk Live. All right, well, welcome back to Tuesday. No, it's not Tuesday, it's Thursday. That's right, we have a special edition of Cloud Talk Live today, and I'm so excited to get to talk to my good friend John Gates, who's going to be up here very shortly. But you know the routine, folks. I would love for you to to introduce yourself in those comments. Whatever platform you're on, if you type your name in there and where you're coming from, well, then we can see it and we can respond. We can say hello. And it also helps to know where in the world you are. Now, if you want to get a hold of us, have a comment for us, question for us, maybe you have an idea for a show or a guest, well, you can reach out to us at solve@rackspace.com. Easy to do. Break out your email and send us a little note. We would love to hear from you. Well, so it's a Thursday, and that's unusual. I've got some news for you a little bit later on what's coming up, because next week's going to be a little bit different too. I'm going to be back here on Thursday. Hey, Afib is here. Aftab. Sorry, I can't read. That was really small on my screen. Well, folks, you know the routine. If you're afraid of missing one of these episodes, and you can always find them on YouTube or LinkedIn. Hey, Lauren, glad you're here. Well, you can listen to them anytime if you just subscribe to the podcast. So head over to wherever you find your podcast and subscribe to Cloud Talk. And from there, you will find all of us, all of the episodes there, not only from these live shows, but also some long form interviews type stuff that we've got as well. Hey, Enrique, glad you're here. Hey, Arcana, glad you are here as well. Megan didn't come into the office today. She's sleeping home, working in her pajamas. We got Chicago here. John is here. So glad you are with us. Hey, and so go ahead and subscribe to that. I'd love for you to do that. And if you find it interesting, you find it useful, you can put a review in there. Look, there's people walking back there. This is not a virtual background. This is Rackspace corporate headquarters. In fact, I can even show you. I'm gonna push this button. One little behind the scenes. Look, that's me working on that. And if you're typing your name in, you'd see it on that screen right there. And let me push this button, and you can get a little look. There's the main entrance. Yes, I have new toys, and I'm happy to show them to you, so you can see all the things that are happening. Hey, Sean Gardner, I'm going to text you later. Hope you're doing well. Well, hey, enough of me playing with the new cameras and new toys. So, because I want to get on to the show, we've got some great folks who are here today. I would love, look at all that. Vinesh is here. Vinesh, we need to get you on this program. All right, well, let's move on. Hey, guys, I am delighted to get to bring up longtime friend John Gates. In fact, as I've mentioned before, as we've talked, that John was Rackspace's first CTO and the longest running CTO. I think he did about 18 years here, and that's pretty incredible. So, John, why don't you come on up on stage here with me? Daniel will make it happen. Daniel's been on vacation. I think he's a little slow on the buttons. John, welcome again back to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I
Now,
think
John,
when you panned around back there, I could see my old desk. I think I saw a shot of that. So
I'll show everybody where the old desk was. Let's push this button and make it wide, and I can, wrong direction.
Yeah, it's right up there.
Right up there, kind of near to the right of that flag, kind of back behind that building. Yeah.
Yep, that's the place. I remember. It's been a few years, but I'm excited to be back.
You did a few years there, didn't you?
I did for sure.
Hey, I was super excited having you back on. And actually, folks, this is going to be part of a longer series. So, John, this fancy little desk that I have can support more than one person doing it. So maybe on the next one, when you're in town, you can come back over to Castle and we can record from here.
Would be happy to do it.
But you're not at home, are you? Where in the world are you, John?
I am in fabulous Las Vegas this week for the Black Hat conference. So I've been attending Black Hat all week and talking to customers, talking to vendors, partners, all kinds of folks in the ecosystem, the security ecosystem. Black Hat is a big security conference. Thousands of people showed up. I feel like conferences are back, post-COVID. Everybody wants to get traveling and get out, and Vegas is obviously a great place to do it.
It is. Hey, by the way, I don't know if you can see the chat there, but Natalie Silva says good morning. You remember Natalie?
Good morning, Natalie. Yes, good to see you.
We got folks in from the UK. We have somebody in from, I'm going to guess it's Middle East, but I can't read that. But I'm glad that you're here as well. In fact, our episode on Tuesday, we had Rackspace's general manager of our Dubai Middle East region, which is kind of cool. Well, John, Black Hat, it's all about what's going on in cybersecurity. Kind of, what are you hearing? What have you learned this week? I know you're talking to customers and whatnot, but what's scary in cyber?
Well, yesterday the keynote was an interesting guy by the name of Chris Krebs. Chris used to be the director of CISA, which is a government entity agency, if you will, that is basically tasked with protecting, the businesses in America, cybersecurity, coordinating a lot of activities around that. And he had a great keynote speech, a little scary at times. He talks about, how rough the world is right now, how many bad actors there are. We talked about how a lot of software remains vulnerable. We're putting out a lot of insecure software every day. There's more complexity, more integrations with like these insecure products, whether they be cloud, SaaS, or on-prem. And the challenge is that it increases efficiency, but at the same time, it sort of reduces our ability to wrap our arms around it and lowers our transparency, so to speak. And then you think about a conference like Black Hat, you've got hundreds, if not more, vendors out there pushing some new product or solution,
Right.
and that increases complexity even more. And so, his point was, we're adding and adding and adding and, kind of creating a web of complexity and new products to try to solve some of that. And that's a challenge. It's a challenge for all of us in the industry, customers, the whole web, that, so to speak, is it in a position that's really challenging.
It is. And, any system where you're adding more and more things, like you say, adding complexity, it just makes it harder to understand the inner workings of all of those things. And you're talking about as we add different things to our corporate networks, it's harder to get our arms wrapped around what's actually happening there. And it really drives us towards, I think you're teeing us up very well into the topic of the day, and that is zero trust. Of course, our clever title is Zero Trust, Zero Nonsense. Why is zero trust? I mean, you sort of defined why it's important, but let's first of all, it's a phrase you and I know really well because we live in this world, but let's define what zero trust actually means.
Right. So if you think about where we have come from as an industry, we have been building networks for many years. We've been securing networks for just as long. The internet has always been a part of our world, but it's historically been outside the corporate sphere, outside the corporate network. Yeah. And so for the most part, what we did as security professionals is we would protect our perimeter. We would mount a firewall defense at the edge of our network. We would kind of create a moat around our castle. We would try to keep the bad guys out and keep all the good traffic on the inside. But as we know, that world doesn't exist anymore. We don't really have a easy to define perimeter. We have no way to wrap our arms around all of our users and our networks, because things are so distributed. Users are distributed, applications are moving, outside of the corporate perimeter. They're not in the data center anymore. They're in the cloud or SaaS providers. And so what's emerged is a new model of security. And I like to think about zero trust as a model or a philosophy rather than a product. It's not a product that you can point to. It's not something that you can say that's zero trust.
Yeah, there's no shrink wrap box you're going to pull off the shelf and say, install this and we'll all be better.
Exactly right. And so companies have to adopt the philosophy of zero trust, which means that we want to basically no longer allow users and endpoints automatic access. We want to restrict access by default. We want to restrict it until we can identify the user based on their identity, based on their device posture, based on a number of other factors. We want to identify them and figure out, do they have the rights to access a certain application? We want to basically assess who they are and where they're coming from and what their device posture is before we grant access. And then we want to do continuous assessment during the session to determine if they should continue to be granted access. And so it's very much an ongoing process in terms of validation of access.
Right. So, we've got our great worldwide audience is here. We've got the professor from down in Costa Rica. Really need to go visit him. Somehow that maybe can be a work trip and I can get a trip to Costa Rica. We got folks in from India. We're glad that you guys are here. Todd's here. Alejandro's here. Everybody, is your organization, kind of put it in the chat. I'd love to know, is your organization, as far as you're aware, implementing a zero trust, mindset and strategy? And you can think of it like this: like if you were going into a corporate office, your gate card, your pass key that gets you in the thing, gets you in that front door. But a zero trust model, if we're going to use a building as an example, doesn't mean you get into every door and every room inside of that facility. Zero trust says, okay, you can get into this part, but you can't get into that part. Now, John, why is that important in a security mindset?
Well, if you think about what you have inside of an enterprise, you have hundreds, if not thousands, of different applications, and also you have hundreds, if not thousands, of employees who need access to some data, but not everything, right? And then the challenges with security, there is always the risk that one of those end users might not be actually who they say they are. Like somebody might have compromised a machine or a device and taken over the personality or the identity of someone else. Maybe a phishing attack or something like that came in, and now the machine is compromised. So you don't necessarily just want to trust that every machine should have access to every application. That just does not make sense anymore.
No.
So what we want to do is we want to compartmentalize our security. We want to wrap a perimeter around each machine, each device. We want to sort of put micro perimeters around machines and devices. And then we also want to restrict access to particular applications. And what that does is, even if a machine is compromised, it doesn't allow a attacker to jump from application to application and move laterally across your network. That used to be a real problem. In fact, a lot of existing VPN solutions allow for that. They allow you access to the entire network. Once you're in the VPN, once you've been validated, you can start scanning for applications that might have vulnerabilities inside the organization. And that's a real risk, because
Huge risk.
you really don't want a rogue actor that has taken on the identity of an employee to be able to look at your network and without any kind of restriction.
That's right. And, if we think about how our corporate networks have evolved, they went from being these buildings and these organizations that had internet and their network capability there. But really, nobody worked remote. If we go back into the 2000s, even, I think about how these have all evolved. And then slowly they would start to make allowances for how individuals might come in and do work from a remote location. It took the form of a VPN, a secure tunnel to carry me in to that organization. And then all my accesses were just the same. Well, that has, of course, started to change dramatically in the teens. But over the past couple of years, one of the huge impacts of COVID and everybody going home is the corporate network got redefined, didn't it, John? And what you like to say that the internet has become the new corporate network.
The internet indeed has become the new corporate network. I think if it weren't for the internet, the work from home model would not have been possible. If you don't, if you think about what happened during the early part of the pandemic, we were sent home. We connected via our home broadband or our Starbucks Wi-Fi or whatever network we could get access to. And then a lot of companies, if they did have that VPN infrastructure in place, they would tell their employees to just connect to the VPN. And I always recall the VPN being a bit of a clunky experience. It was like dialing up to the internet. It was basically a process that you had to go through. You had to find your credentials and maybe a two-factor token if you were really secure. You had to punch in those 6 digits or 8 digits or whatever it is, and then the process would take place. And then you were on the network. And so from the user's perspective, you were connected into the corporate network. But then again, that presented problems. If that VPN was routed through the corporate headquarters, maybe the applications in the corporate headquarters would work well. But what about those SaaS applications now that were outside the corporate headquarters? Now, are you going to bounce through headquarters to go connect to your email or your Salesforce tool or whatever it might be? Those things became sometimes problematic. And the worst was video conferencing. If you were doing any kind of video conference in real time, those packets might have to actually route through the corporate headquarters. Sometimes there were solutions for that, but it was always difficult at times to make all that work. And that's really where people started to look at better, more modern solutions to solve that problem.
That's right. Anubhav just makes a comment here in the chat. Maybe we can bring that up. He says, you guys can read it right there. But ultimately what he's saying is this is not a one and done. Security is never a one and done. But adopting something like this, ultimately, and this goes into another thing that you mentioned when we were getting ready for this, John, and that was that, we don't know what the future holds. I mean, who would have thought back when you and I were knocking around Rackspace in the early teens that a global pandemic would come along and and create such a catalyst for this type of a transformation and create an environment where a zero trust model is required. Now, what Anubhav was just saying is that, of course, it's not a one and done. It takes time to do it, and you have to constantly reassess. And it drives towards what you said the other day, and that was, we don't know what the future holds, but we can invent what our future is going to be. Maybe you could unpack that just for a second, and also tie in. I'd love for you. You're a field CTO over at Cloudflare, so let's talk also a little bit about how Cloudflare helps enable this.
Sure, for sure. So absolutely right in terms of we cannot predict the future. I'm sort of one of those people that once a year I do try to write a blog post about the future, and it's very difficult, and very rarely do my predictions come true as I expected. But if you think about what you want to build when it comes to a security, a network architecture, anything in computing, you want to build something that is more or less future proof. No matter what happens, no matter what change comes along, you can adapt to it. You can change with the times, whatever may come down the road. I think with regards to the pandemic, it was such a shock. And then the following supply chain disruptions that came as a result of the pandemic were also sort of a ripple effect and shock to the system, because we're used to being able to call the vendor and order a new piece of equipment, and it shows up a day or two later via our favorite delivery services. And that reality came to an end due to supply chain disruptions. And so a lot of companies struggled to update their networks or to evolve their networks during the early part of the pandemic. Even today, we see supply chains that sometimes are lead times of 6, 12, even more months in terms of getting hardware, and especially if you want lots of it. And so a lot of companies have adapted by leveraging the cloud. The cloud was sort of ready for anything, right? And if you think about what you can do today with a hyperscale cloud, you can order hardware on demand, basically, virtual machines, any kind of database, any kind of tool. The same should apply to networking and security. And that's really what Cloudflare is doing, is embracing that cloud delivered model to wrap security around the internet. The internet is the new corporate network. We need internet native tools. We need a way to get users onto the internet and onto their applications very quickly across the internet. We need to do it securely, privately, make sure it's reliable, it performs well. And so what Cloudflare has really done with our mission to help build a better internet is wrapped our arms around that problem, right? The problem of leveraging the internet for some, very real world work related activities, which means, making the network work really well in these kinds of contexts that we've been talking about.
Super interesting. Now, as I mentioned earlier, folks, this is part of a longer series. John and I are going to be back about once a month through the rest of the fall. He may throw some other smart people at us from Cloudflare, but Rackspace recognizes Cloudflare as one of these companies that really, I didn't want to say a vendor, because they really should be a partner of yours to help be one of the tools to help simplify the tool sets that you're using to help enact a zero trust model, and to help you, refine that better on. I think, John, next time I want to dig into a little bit of the architecture of how you guys are actually doing that. Let's look at some of your points of presence.
For sure.
Services that are there. Let's look at the transparency of what it's like to a user. You talk about the old VPN scenario where it feels like dial-up. The 80s were not that far, or 90s weren't that far away from when we were doing that. So it rings true. But John, thank you for taking time there at Black Hat. Get some more scary stories for us so that you can. I always love a good scary security story. It makes me feel motivated to go update my security on all my machines and iPads and all the things.
Absolutely will, Jeff. Thanks for having me on today, and we'll get together again real soon.
That sounds great. Everybody, you can find John Engates on LinkedIn and Twitter and all the usual places. And if you have any questions about learning more about Cloudflare, it's as easy as just going to cloudflare.com. As you know, here on Cloud Talk, we do not pitch Rackspacey sort of things, but we do bring you the best in partners who can help you in your network. So, John, enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks for getting up early with us.
Thank you, Jeff.
Absolutely. All right, folks. Yes, Daniel just went and discovered John's profile. Daniel, if you wouldn't mind putting that in the LinkedIn chat, that would be super fun. I thought it was Megan who did that. She's always so on it. I love that. All right, folks. Well, conversations like this can be found here every Tuesday and sometimes Thursdays, like today. But if you miss them, you don't know when it's going to happen, you can always head over to rackspace.com/solve. And come on, move forward, my little slides. There we go. And you can find all sorts of information. I'd love for you to subscribe to the podcast. You can be found anywhere that podcasts are found. And you'll be able to get the audio from all these conversations. Now, granted, you don't get to see the cool behind the scenes pictures like I just brought up, but for that, you have to show up here with us on Tuesdays and sometimes Thursdays. All right. Well, that takes us through the discussion, which means it's time to move on to figuring out what is new in the cloud. And that's where I bring to you some news articles and why the cloud is important in that construct and how it can actually help you. All right, everybody. The first article comes to us, and it says, this is a good one. Found this yesterday. Which company is winning the cloud war? Now, this is a Motley Fool article. Now, you say, Motley Fool, why are they bringing us tech information? Well, what they're bringing us actually is the financial stats of who is growing. Now, let's take a look at this. We know who showed up first and who showed up second, but the reality is that this has been coming for a long time, and where we are now is that Microsoft, and as we're looking at year-on-year growth, is now growing faster than AWS. Now, that makes you say, hey, does that actually mean that Microsoft is larger than AWS? Well, they're not, but they are still growing. They are growing faster. We can argue, does that mean that the market is saturating? I don't know, but it's going to be interesting to watch here for the next little while. So that's our first article, is kudos over to our friends there. Now, over at Security Week, there was a super interesting article, speaking of security, John over at Black Hat, that open redirect flaws in American Express and Snapchat was exploited by phishing attacks. Now, this is super interesting. It's super deep. You're going to need to go over to Security Week to read a little bit more. But what they're ultimately able to do is modify the URL, send that URL to people in the form of phishing attacks. They're logging in, and all of a sudden, their credentials are exploited, and that experience then gets hijacked. And nothing good happens after that. But it ultimately, what I want to do is kind of set that bit of the tech aside for 1 second and really talk about it in the construct of the word phishing. Guys, the most vulnerable place in your organization and on your own tech is your own little finger as you are clicking on things, or your people in your organization. I tell you, nothing good comes from clicking anything, so just be cautious with that and utilize tools that help clean that up. Now, I think in one of our future episodes with our friends at Cloudflare, they bought a really cool tool that helps protect your email, and the gentleman who started that company has some really interesting background, Department of Defense type stuff. Talk about telling scary security stories. He does it well. All right, so that's what's going on in the news. Let's move over to cloud releases. Those pesky folks at AWS, Azure, and Google have not been resting. So AWS Glue now supports new execution options that allows customers to reduce costs in their pre-production and test in non-urgent data. So again, this is the thing. I talk about this almost every week when the cloud providers are doing updates. It's not always about some new crazy feature, but continuing to refine the capabilities that exist in each and every feature, and also where they're available throughout the world and all the different data centers and availability zones and such. This is why it's so important that when you're working inside of the cloud, that you don't just set and forget. You don't just deploy and walk away. You've got to continue to refine and help your environments get the most about what these folks are providing. In this construct, if this is something that you use, you would be able to save money. Who doesn't want to save money? All right, let's move over to Azure. And Azure's new deployment is around, in general availability, you can upgrade VMware VMs protected by site recovery to modernize that entire experience. So again, refining the capabilities that already exist there. This, I think I talked about early in the year when it was in preview, but now, of course, it's available for all in general availability. And then lastly, over at Google, querying Google Cloud Bigtable allows you can now go outside of big query tables themselves. So those can be external things stored in their storage and all sorts of different locations. So if you are a Google user and a BigQuery user, you can now access data that's not stored natively directly in BigQuery, which is great. As I always tell you, I tell you this every week. I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm here to give you information. All I have for you is information. But the one thing I do have to sell, I do have something to sell, and that is coming to work at this incredible place. And that takes the form of our job of the day here at Rackspace. Now, the job of the day today is a practice manager, architecture and engineering. So we need somebody to help run the specific areas inside of Rackspace. So as a practice manager means you're overseeing the practice for this stuff. If you're passionate about cloud technology solutions and are driven to learn more about them and keep up with market evolution, come to Rackspace. Help us do that for our customers. Help us define new solutions. Help us create new solutions for our customers. Help deploy those in some cases and run this area. If you're interested in learning more about that, you can head over to rackspace.jobs. I found this one, maybe it was about 10 or so down the screen, but you can find them. There are some incredible jobs over there. We have hundreds of them available as work from home, as specific in offices area, US-centric, EMEA-centric, APJ-centric. If you are on planet Earth and you are technical, have we got a job for you? All right, folks, so if you want to learn more about what we're up to here, you can head over to rackspace.com/solve. Safest place to go on the internet. You will not be sold to there. You will only be given new information to make you a smarter, wiser person in the work that you are doing. And as always, I'm going to implore you, go sign up for the podcast. You can subscribe if you can find it anywhere that podcasts are found. I would be remiss if I didn't thank our good friends over at AppDynamics. AppDynamics leads the world in software observability. If you want to connect your developers to your business units and create KPIs that connect all the way through, AppDynamics is the place to go. So next week, I am actually taking my youngest son back to school, which means off to Nashville I go. We will not be doing a live show on Tuesday, but I got a clip show for you. I went through all the shows we did this year and found some amazing episodes. In fact, as soon as I finish doing this right now, I am going to go and record this episode. So you'll find that on Tuesday. But on Thursday, I just talked to you about AppDynamics. In fact, they're bringing their CTO. We're not talking field CTO here. They're bringing their CTO, John Byrne. He's the CTO of AppDynamics, and we're going to talk software observability. I hope that you will be there with me. Well, my good friends, it's time to push that button. We have come to the end of yet another episode of Cloud Talk Live. We're back here live on next Thursday. Hope to see you then.